So this video idea actually came from Steve Andre3447, who asked in the comments what third-party games was I most excited to see come to the Switch 2. And honestly, I hadn't really thought about it that much because I'd been so laser focused on all of the launch titles coming out for the Switch 2 that I hadn't really given a lot of thought to the games that I would like to see coming over to it in the future. So first off, Steve, thank you so much for the suggestion, and second of all, let's just go ahead and jump right in, because this first game, even though it is definitely a third-party game, it feels like it could have been something that Nintendo would have made, given its just, bold aesthetic and playfulness, and that would be Hi-Fi Rush. And Tango Gameworks really knocked it out of the park, creating this very unique experience with fun, engaging rhythm-based combat, colorful over-the-top characters, and of course a stellar soundtrack. And initially I played this game on the Xbox, later on they actually were kind enough to kick me a key so I could check it out on the PC, and it ran pretty well on the Steam Deck. I did not get a steady 60 FPS out of it, but I was pretty firmly above 50 FPS most of the time. And considering how well it ran on the Steam Deck, and given that the Nintendo Switch 2 is supposed to be slightly more powerful than that, I'm positive that they could do a flat 60 FPS on the Switch 2 if it's able to come over to that platform. And considering Phil Spencer has already publicly praised the Nintendo Switch 2 and expressed an interest in trying to bring Microsoft's games over to that platform, I think this one will be an absolute no-brainer, and I would love to play it on the Nintendo Switch 2 if they manage to bring it over there. And this next entry is also a third-person action game, albeit one with a much steeper learning curve than Hi-Fi Rush, and that would be Sekiro. So we already had Dark Souls on the original Nintendo Switch, and of course later on we're getting Elden Ring and DuskBloods, what appears to be a spiritual successor to Bloodborne, coming out to the Switch 2, so it's not like there isn't a precedent for having these types of gaming experiences on Nintendo's hardware. And this game ran at 30 FPS on the original PS4 and 60 FPS I believe on the PS5, and given that the Nintendo Switch 2 is supposed to land somewhere between those two power profiles, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect this game could run at least 40 to 50 FPS on the hardware, and probably look pretty great at that frame rate in handheld considering the VRR that you can use in portable mode. And granted, you can get pretty close to 60 FPS on the Steam Deck, but I would love to see it come to the Switch 2 and potentially hit a steady 60 FPS if possible. And I think it's entirely possible this game could make its way there. I mean, after all, Sekiro is already on the PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it could be brought over to the Switch. At first I thought maybe this would be something that would be tied up with a weird licensing or rights deal, but as it turns out, at least initially Activision held the publishing rights for Sekiro, while FromSoft retained the rights to the IP itself. And considering they still own the rights to the IP, and they've already kind of snuggled up to Nintendo, what with, again, Elden Ring and DuskBloods coming soon, I think this would be a no-brainer to bring over for people. And honestly, even if it is through some legal paperwork I don't understand still locked to Activision, Microsoft does own Activision as of 2023, and again, given that Phil Spencer's already expressed praise for the Nintendo Switch 2, I don't think they'd be opposed to putting this on potentially millions of Switch 2s that will eventually be in the wild. And speaking personally, I would have zero reservations about buying this one for a third time. And speaking of games that I would buy for a third, fourth, fifth, or maybe even a sixth time, I'm not going to name one game, but rather 5 different games, because really they all fall under the same umbrella, you might say, from Capcom, and that would be the Resident Evil modern games, including Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil Village. And I know all these Resident Evils, except I believe Resident Evil 4 Remake, got cloud versions that you could stream to the original Nintendo Switch, but I think we can all agree it would be much better to have these playing natively on the hardware, rather than a cloud version that is naturally heavily dependent on your network connectivity. And speaking personally as a huge horror fan, I just really love playing horror games in the handheld format. That's because it's very easy to get super immersed in it by turning out all of the lights and just having your face right next to a portable device's screen to get really immersed in that just horrific atmosphere. Or on the flip side, if you're somebody who's a big scaredy cat, like I am, ironically, you can also just sort of like brighten up the environment fairly easily, put on some nice happy music like the Beatles or something, and play the game in a way that was probably not intended, but perhaps way more approachable for particularly scarier titles. Plus, like I mentioned in that video a few weeks back, I'm definitely a second screen gamer when it comes to portables. I love to play a game in handheld while I throw up something that's thematically similar to whatever I'm playing in the background on the TV, so I would absolutely play any one of these Resident Evil games and probably, just shamelessly throw on the old campy Resident Evil movies from the early 2000s because I do have a special place in my heart for those. And while I haven't tested every single one of the more modern Resident Evil titles on the Steam Deck, I've at least tested 2 and 3 Remake and I believe 7, and they all ran pretty well there. Plus, Capcom's historically been a pretty strong partner for Nintendo anyways, and it would be nice to see them again sort of strongly supporting a Nintendo product out of the gate like they did with the original Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube. And next up, let's get a little bit more modern with a game that I've been playing and just thoroughly enjoying on the Xbox via Game Pass, so much so that as soon as I found a PS5 copy in the wild, I grabbed it immediately, one, because they're kind of hard to come by, and two, because it's just been an incredible game so far, and that would be Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And again, firstly I bought it just because it's an incredible game that came out of nowhere and honestly just sort of blew everybody away, but beyond that, it's just a super satisfying mix of old school JRPG storytelling, but with refreshing combat that enriches the turn-based formula with dodges, parries, and counters. And I have to say, every time you land any one of these, it is incredibly satisfying, and I just can't recommend this game enough. Also, I am not at all ashamed to admit that I am playing this game on baby mode, mostly because I wanted to get through the story more quickly so I could hopefully avoid any spoilers for it, but even on baby mode, this game does offer a challenge. Not so much so that you would get frustrated and quit and just decide the entire game isn't worth playing or anything like that, but it doesn't force you to really drill down hard into those mechanics and make sure that you have, some incredibly nuanced strategy for every Nevron that you come across in the wild. But if you're the kind of player who wants that kind of challenge, it will definitely give that to you. So whether you want to get super technical with this game or really just take in this incredible story with even more incredible performances, it's my personal Game of the Year pick so far. But beyond that, RPGs are just usually a great fit for handhelds anyways, since you can take it with you on the go and squeeze in a little bit of progress here and there, especially if you're going to take some time to just like grind out mobs and level up members of your party. And yeah, given all this high praise that I'm just heaping on Expedition 33 right now, I want this game to be as accessible to as many people as possible because I want this game to do really, really well. Not just, again, because it's a great game and I want to support the developers, but also because I do think it sends a message to AAA developers that, hey, AAA experiences are great, but you don't have to spend AAA dollars to make a game that's really going to resonate with people. Also, given how generous the developers have already been with this game so far, going so far as to even offer a pre-order to bring the collector's edition back for people who didn't get in on it initially and didn't want to pay scalper prices on eBay, I'm fairly certain if this game does come to the Nintendo Switch 2 in a physical form that they would almost certainly try to get the entire game on cart. Not 100% on that, but I think they probably would. And next up is a game that isn't exactly modern considering it is about 7 years old at this point, but honestly I have no doubt it will continue to age like fine wine, and that would be Red Dead Redemption 2. And I think the most obvious reason to bring this over is Rockstar did already put out the original Red Dead Redemption on the Nintendo Switch, so it would be kind of thematically appropriate to go ahead and bring over the sequel, or I guess prequel as well. And I dabbled in this game when it first came to the PlayStation 4, but I got way more into it when I played it on the PC. And just like the original, though obviously greatly expanded, this is a game that invites you to enjoy just hundreds of hours of gameplay if you want. Sure, you could just beeline the main story beats if you want to, but you could also just get lost for dozens of hours at a whack, just wandering through the Old West, taking on hunting challenges, doing side quests, robbing trains, helping random strangers, trying to figure out if they are actually strangers. I mean, this game just has tons and tons to do in it, and there's just something inherently awesome about playing games that have an open world this big and being able to put it in your pocket. Well, so to speak. Maybe a backpack. And when I started playing this more on the Steam Deck in particular, I couldn't get a flat 60 FPS out of it, but I was staying firmly in the 40 to 50 FPS range, and again, given the increased power of the Nintendo Switch 2 over the Steam Deck, I'm betting with a little bit of optimization they could make this thing really sing on the Switch 2 hardware. And just like Sekiro, again, I think there is a precedent for this considering Rockstar did bring the GTA trilogy over to the original Switch. Plus, again, it would be pretty rad to be able to play the original Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 on the same piece of hardware. Granted, I really hope they patch the original Red Dead Redemption 1, but honestly, even at 30 FPS, that game's still super fun and runs pretty great on the Switch, and probably better than the 360 that I'm remembering from, 15 years ago at this point, but yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, would love to see it on the Switch 2. So those are the main games that I think I would love to see brought over to the Switch 2 initially, assuming any of these are actually realistic and not just some pipe dream that I have, but I did want to throw out a couple of honorable mentions as well. And one of those would be Stellar Blade, which I've played and not quite beaten on the PS5. I'm not sure if that's a situation where that's exclusive to that console and the PC for right now. Maybe that's the case, I'm not 100% sure on that. And it is a really fun action game. I don't know if it would be too taxing for the Switch 2, however, so I guess we'd have to wait and see on that one, but I wouldn't mind seeing it come over, particularly in physical form. And also going back to the idea of Phil Spencer and Xbox bringing more of their titles over to the Switch 2, I think the Master Chief Collection would be a no-brainer for this system. How great would it be to be able to play through those original campaigns or engage the multiplayer on the Switch 2 platform? I think that would be super fun, and I say that selfishly as somebody who is currently playing through Halo Reach online with a few friends on the PC, but I think it would be really cool, especially if you could do LAN parties with the Switch 2 or something like that, because that would be so much easier to transport than, say, a full gaming rig. But yeah, maybe that's a little bit of a weird scenario for me to throw out there, but I just think Halo would be super fun to play on the Switch too. And considering how much success Microsoft has seen bringing their games over to PlayStation, and there's going to be millions and millions of Switch 2s out there soon, I'm sure they want a piece of that pie. But hey, what about you? Are there any third-party games that you're hoping come over to the Switch 2? If so, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. As far as what's coming up on the channel, I'm definitely going to be working on a full review of the Switch 2 whenever I get wrapped up with that, and then also, of course, talk about some of the games coming down the pike in July as we get closer to the end of the month. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here with me. I really appreciate it. Have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.